I'm Keith Johnston, your host for Forrester's podcast, What It Means, where we explore the latest market dynamics impacting executives and their customers. Today, we're joined by senior analyst Christina McAllister to discuss how generative AI will transform contact centers. Welcome, Christina.
Thank you for having me.
So, generative AI has a ton of opportunity for a lot of use cases, but you're proposing that it is poised to redefine the contact center and customer service. But to reap its benefits, you're also suggesting that there's a lot of work to be done. They got to go deep, get extensive work. Before we get into all that, can you just tell us, what are the real key opportunities to really impact the contact center?
Absolutely. Contact centers are one of the big test beds for generative AI. There's a lot of natural language kind of conversation happening. There's a lot of opportunity there. And I'd kind of categorize it into three areas. We have customer-facing use cases, so GenAI chatbots. Everyone's talking about it. People have been dreaming about chatbots being better for a really long time. We have agent-facing use cases, so your kind of co-pilot-ish type scenario, and a number of other capabilities that we could talk about in a bit. And then I think on the other side is more analytics, insights, taking that unstructured data, applying some structure to it. Generative AI is really quite good at that.
Yeah, so it seems like, there's a couple of angles. Is that, one is that, this idea of being able to access information more quickly rather than going through a scripted type of performance. You can actually probably gain insights from a conversation, maybe not after the conversation, but almost in real time, right? So there's tons of benefits to, even though we're talking about Gen AI, we could probably make it even a more human experience on the other end instead of it feeling almost robotic like a chatbot does.
I would say so. And I think that a lot of the technologies that we have applied in the past, non-generative AI, all sorts of different kinds of capabilities, have really tried to pull agents down to what I'll say an automatable average. And the way you would do that is through a lot of rules-based systems. And it ends up making things feel, like you said, very robotic.
So, if they're going to dive in headfirst, as you're suggesting, so this is a good thing, right?
I think so. But I think for a pretty specific reason. Something we've observed is that generative AI has really been an important catalyst in the contact center and also enterprises at large. But in the contact center, it's been a little bit of a kick for folks to dig in and tackle some of the challenges that have been lurking around for years, but have been really hard to prioritize. There hasn't been a good enough reason to do it. But these areas turn out to be essentially prerequisites for getting anywhere reasonable with generative AI. So we're seeing priorities shift over to these areas, which has been a very welcome thing. It's been a long time coming.
So let's go a little bit further in the challenges that you started touching on. And it's what can we do right here and now? It just seems like Gen AI, being the conversational nature or the ability to access structured and unstructured conversation, if you will, for the customer service, that there's something that we can do right now. This isn't so far in the future, we can get going.
Absolutely. And I think that it's been a long time coming. I've spent essentially my entire career in the contact center space. I started out selling the kind of precursor of chatbots, and it really wasn't much of a chatbot back then. And this has been something that we've been really wanting to do, automate conversations, have, meaningful support for agents. And it's really hard to do all of that in real time. It's really hard to do that in a way that feels good. But I think we're there. There's obviously some hurdles to jump over from safety and security and standpoint and all this kind of stuff. We could talk about that. But there are some meaningful business value to unlock now. The most highly adopted use case, I'd say, is generative AI contact call summaries, essentially. So being able to take the transcript at the end of the call, summarize it with Gen AI, and publish it to a CRM or something like that. Historically, that's been 2 to 4 minutes of an agent tapping at a screen, tapping at their keys and trying to consolidate all of the notes that they have about the customer. They're not consistent. They're often not accurate, and it's very, very expensive. That is almost not instant, but immediately retrievable ROI, right? You put that in the contact center. It's very, very easy to deploy, and it's a meaningful improvement right away. And then there's a number of other use cases that are in market now that I'm seeing folks getting value out of now. Part of it would be, for example, helping chat agents or folks who are answering email tickets to draft better responses to customers that are more accurate, that are more relevant, helping them, cut down on typing time and all of that kind of thing. Or accessing knowledge from backend systems. Agents spend an unreasonable amount of time digging around, trying to find the right knowledge snippet out of some kind of crazy long PDF, but being able to ask a question or even have it suggested to you based on the transcript in real time. Hey, this is exactly the answer to the customer's question. There's nothing better than that from a knowledge access perspective, especially when we know that contact centers have really high attrition. And so therefore you're dealing with a lot of novice agents all the time that need that support.
So I just find it so interesting. I mean, you kind of brush through the, perhaps the risk here, but it just seems that like with attrition that these Gen AI tools could, number one, make the call center agents smarter, faster. And number two, from a risk standpoint, we're not talking about the Gen AI being like kind of taking the reins. We still have a human in the center where they're kind of mitigating the risk, right? They're just accessing better information faster and probably being able to deliver a more meaningful experience to the customer.
I would say so. There are companies that are looking to deploy generative AI chatbots for their customers directly. And there's a little bit more to be concerned about there, a little more to think about as far as making sure that it's accessing trusted knowledge and that you have guardrails appropriate to your use case and all of that, which is also required for agents because they're not necessarily going to know the difference if it's a hallucination or a knowledge snippet, right? But I do think that most of the use cases that companies are deploying right now, and where we would certainly recommend people start, is supporting your agents first, because honestly, that is going to be the largest majority of your conversations. They need a lot of help. There's a lot of improvement to be made in improving the conversation with your customer. And also, we know from our CX index that customer service is a huge driver of customer loyalty. So making that better, there's a lot of good reasons to do that.
I mean, is there really any good reason to jump right in and let Gen AI replace the call center agents? Or would you just recommend that they just focus on the next year, 2 years to just enhance them?
I would say that for the average contact center, so the average company that we chat with in our day-to-day work at Forrester, they're not ready. There's a lot of kind of like underlying infrastructure that needs to be improved and a lot of kind of like baseline tech that needs to be, enhanced or replaced or whatever, that I don't see a full-scale replacement of agents in the next couple of years. But just to kind of tease a little bit of future research, Kate Leggett and I are working on some research on the future of the agent workspace, so the tools that the agents use in their day-to-day work. And we've asked vendors to give us some really forward-looking perspectives, like what's going on 5 years from now, even a little farther. And so like we're looking midterm, long term, and we're expecting things to change quite significantly. I think it would be naive to suggest that Gen AI is not going to have huge impact on actually automating contact center volumes. We're going to see better automation than we've ever seen and less contact center volumes coming into human agents. But that means that the way that the agent, like the tools that the agent uses and the kinds of conversations that they have are going to be different. So we're going to see a lot of change. But I don't see kind of the elimination of that role happening in the super near term, not for most very large enterprises anyway.
And what are the few things that really need to come together, whether it be infrastructure, training, or what have you, to even get to that enhanced agent workspace that you guys are exploring?
I would say that there have been a lot of areas historically underinvested in the contact center. Knowledge management is one of them. Everyone can kind of agree that it's important to have knowledge and that sort of thing, but it's hard to invest appropriately in knowledge when the return wasn't there. But now it's like an absolutely key ingredient prerequisite for anything reasonable with generative AI. So it is forcing folks to take a hard look at assembling a coherent knowledge strategy, which is great. It's great to see that. It's important. And it is a foundation for almost everything that you're going to do in the contact center. And then we have, just the screens that the agents interface with. Some of them are dealing with, like 10 different screens. They're bopping around all over the place. They have, they're never in one consistent location. Even if they do have a modern solution, it might just harmonize like, hey, voice and chat together, but there's really nothing else. They have to go over here and over there from all the other tools that they need to satisfy a customer's question. It's hard to use a Copilot if you're 10 screens away. You're not going to get a lot of value out of that.
So JP does this great research around AIQ, which essentially is assessing the readiness of a lot of frontline workers and other workers for that matter. So contact center agents sound perfect for that. If you can make a call right now, are contact center agents actually ready for Gen AI?
I would find it hard to agree. And I think JP might agree with me that most folks aren't. And that would certainly extend to agents. The contact center agent is really no different. And like I said earlier, we have that added wrinkle that contact centers have super high attrition. So you have that perpetually rotating roster of novice agents, which is especially challenging when you're navigating a space that is changing as quickly as the contact center is. But for sure, we need to invest in, first of all, like understanding the level of readiness, not just for our contact center agents, but also our supervisors and our administrative staff or operational staff, because everyone in the contact center is going to be augmented by Gen AI. It's not just going to be the agents themselves. But also we need to think about infusing them with a whole bunch of other kinds of skills. And JP's research touches on this also, where we're looking at what's going to be left after Gen AI handles the easier stuff, the lower hanging fruit. It's going to be the more emotionally charged conversations, the conversations that are more appropriate to insert a human into. Maybe it's service to sales, maybe it's relationship building. And that requires a different person, maybe a different kind of hiring profile, more emotional, soft skills, emotional intelligence, in addition to the competencies around interfacing with the AI systems.
So do you think that AI can allow more time for the agent to focus on these emotionally charged situations, focus on their EQ, or is the AI actually assisting in them delivering these tough moments?
Both. I think it frees them up, certainly. Like they're not going to be hammered by the everlasting queue of, millions of calls waiting for them and just like one after the other. Once we have generative AI supporting more of that, the simpler stuff, at least to start, and increasingly more transactional, back and forth self-service, what is left over will be the trickier stuff, the exceptions, the stuff that requires more relationship building. And I think that it's AI in general, whether it's non-generative or generative, is a huge benefit to being able to consolidate and highlight exactly the right information. Kate and I believe that the future of the agent workspace is going to be more dynamic. We're going to see the generative AI assembling the right context for the agent based on what that conversation is about. I don't need to know everything about you. I just need to know just enough about who you are to the brand. What is your loyalty status? What is it that I need in order to have that connection? Because it's not feasible for me as a human being to go digging into every single customer's profile, but we can have it intelligently surface all of the right context for me to be able to do what I do best, which is being a human.
So all these things that sound fantastic to achieve this. Obviously, we started out talking about technology, but you need technology to support this technology in the call center. You talked about there's a lot of antiquated systems that are out there. I guess maybe can you describe a few investments or technology or other actually that we need to do to like get this thing started?
Absolutely. So every contact center is going to be coming at this with a different kind of current state, right? They have different priorities and needs. They have a different legacy stack, different, issues with their legacy stack, and we've never had more choice than before, or than now rather, from what that contact center tech landscape is really looking like. So we have a lot of solution categories overlapping. For example, CRM and CCaaS are getting a lot closer together. We're seeing a lot of strong partnerships there. And we also see new entrants into the contact center space like Microsoft and Google and Sprinkler and Salesforce that did not start in the contact center, to be sure, but they are offering a different spin on this space. And so when we think about the folks that are dealing with the legacy solution stack and they have to graduate into something that's a little bit more modern, the recommendation that I would have is to prioritize an incremental evolution. And this is a little bit to do with what we were chatting about earlier, where we don't need to wait it's not a kind of a space age kind of investment. We don't need to wait 10 years down the road in order to have value. We can start kind of prioritizing business value now rather than trying to eat the apple all in one bite. And I'll give an example. One of the big kind of hot button topics in the contact center is the idea of, cloud migration of the telephony stack or the voice stack. Some companies that I've talked with are facing an end of life situation where their current on-premise solution is no longer going to be supported, which represents business risk on their side. And they have to move. They have to shift onto a modern cloud platform. They have to move everything. And for them, that's the right choice. They should pick a platform that has all the features that they need. But I would prioritize making sure that that solution set is open and integratable, right? Like easy to integrate with to avoid vendor lock-in. But there are some companies that are not ready to move to the cloud at this point from a telephony standpoint. And, there's lots of benefits there, but not everybody's ready for that. And it's a big, hairy endeavor that'll take generously a couple of years to see through. And that's before you get into any of the fun stuff, including GenAI. So if you're using on-premise telephony and you want to invest in GenAI solutions now, or real-time analytics, real-time agent augmentation, I just want to call out that you do not have to move your telephony to the cloud as a prerequisite. It's harder, certainly, to invest here, but there are very innovative vendors that have invested in the hard problem of integrating with on-premise telephony stacks, and they offer a new way for businesses to get value now without requiring their dial tone to move to the cloud. And so I think that boiling it down to its kind of barest essence around what are you actually missing and where are the areas that are required? Are you recording and transcribing your calls right now? If you're not, you should, because you're not going to be able to do a whole heck of a lot on the back of the transcript if you don't have a transcript. But there's a lot of distractions in the market around kind of what's the first step? And the first step doesn't have to be, hey, undertake an entire 2-year migration effort so that you can think about, GenAI in 2 years from now.
That sounds promising because, quality and scale of your contact center is actually dictated by cost oftentimes. Is this transition to leveraging Gen AI and possibly migrating to the cloud, does that change the equation there when it comes to funding a great call center?
I would separate the cloud migration from that. Of course, there's math to be done on whether or not the kind of on-premise versus cloud is the right move. But I would say that it's expensive to move too. So agnostic of the move to cloud, whether or not you go that route, I would say that you have the opportunity to save costs by leveraging generative AI if you apply it to certain business problems. I don't think that Gen AI is the perfect solution to all problems, but if you want to tackle some issues that have been historically very, very tricky to solve, there's a much lower bar to just getting in the door around being able to see some value immediately. The example that I gave earlier was generative AI post-call summaries. I used to sell that kind of solution, and the business case was silly. Frankly, you looked at it and you're like, they're not even going to believe me because there's just so much money being wasted on things like just, taking notes by hand, right?
So let's put cost aside. If we were going to take ourselves on a journey on where to start so that we can leverage Gen AI to basically make our very talented contact center employees more powerful, where would you start?
I think I would honestly start exactly where you said it, by making my contact center employees more powerful. And I'll explain a little bit more about that. The super lowest hanging fruit, the use case that is by far the most adopted, if you look at anything across the contact center, is generative AI post-call summaries. I said it before, it's easy, people deploy it, the business case is obvious, and you can use the ROI from that to fund more, future programs. But from there, I would say, taking a look at your agent's workflow, which, by the way, is super important to understand what your agents do every day and what is taking them the most time to do and what is dragging on their time and preventing them from spending the appropriate amount of time with your customers. There's a lot of insights to be gleaned, and part of the Gen AI summary effort can help you start to have an easier way of consuming that, to get a feel for where your agent's getting stuck, why are your agents putting folks on hold, what systems need a little bit of improvement, so that we can apply even just regular technologies like automation to kind of connect the dots between multiple systems so that they can do their work more quickly, but being able to support them in real time, to give them guidance or to give them access to knowledge is the kind of next step after that, I would say, for sure.
That sounds like great advice. And I just love how tangible this use case for Gen AI actually is. And so, I look forward to more research and more advice on this journey. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. No problem.
If you like what you heard today, subscribe to Forrester's What It Means podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player. To continue the conversation, follow Forrester on LinkedIn or drop us a note at podcast@forrester.com. Thanks for listening.